Hi, I'm Liz and I like to knit, and you are watching episode 4 of my knitting podcast. I have some tea this morning and I've changed up my mugs. I don't know how I've managed to use the exact same one for every previous podcast. I'm also changing things up a little bit because this is not coffee. I have already had coffee, so hopefully I'll be louder right off the bat today. Already feeling psyched, chatty, and ready to talk about some knits. So, let's start with what I'm wearing. This is the Flax Light by Tin Can Knits. This is not a new knit, and if I stretch out the sleeves, you can get a little better idea of what it looks like. This, I knit a few years ago, and then it's also had some modification done to it, which I'm not going to show you because it's underneath this. So you're just going to have to trust me or look at my pictures on Ravelry. I think I have pictures of the modifications on Ravelry. Definitely talked about it. But this is knit in Knitpicks Capretta Superwash, which is an 80% merino wool, and then 10% nylon, 10% cashmere. And you can probably tell that the cashmere makes it a little bit pilly, we'll say. Just a smidgen. In fact, normally if I go to wear this, I always have to check for these giant fluffs that just constantly form on it. Even hand washing it gets more pills, but that's okay. It's really soft. It's surprisingly warm. I definitely knit it at a looser gauge than the yarn recommends. I think it recommends US size 1 through 3 needles, and this is knit in stockinette on a US 5 or 3.75 millimeter, and then the ribbing is on a US 2 or 2.75. There's not very much ribbing on it. Regarding the pattern itself, the yoke, it's a top-down raglan, and there is optional short row shaping that you can do, and I definitely chose that option. Especially if I'm making something with not a whole ton of ease, I definitely always make sure that I am going to add the short row option or fudge it if there isn't one for the sweater. And this is knit with basically 0 ease, possibly some negative ease around the bust now, because I think I fluctuate, and I think I'm a little bit bigger than I was when I actually made it. But I made the 37-inch bust size, and like I said at the time, 0 ease. And then after I got through the yoke, I kind of stopped following the instructions specifically. I think it's knit so it's straight, you don't do any shaping, and then you do normal just ribbing at the bottom to match the ribbing at the neck. And I ended up making this with some waist shaping, some pretty aggressive waist shaping for me personally. And basically I knit to the widest point of the bust, knit a little bit longer, less than an inch, and then decreased about 24 stitches over 3 inches, and then knit about an inch straight, and then increased again about 24 stitches. And that gave, I think about 3 inches of decrease. Could be wrong there, but basically I wouldn't do that today if I was modifying a sweater. I'm pretty happy with a straight sweater, especially if it has 0 ease. I'm okay with it being just a little bit loose. But I did increase it again out to the fullest part of my belly/hips. So the problem was I wasn't wearing it a lot with that. Not sure why. But again, I'm really not one that fusses about if it's not working, I'll just go in and fix it. And so what I thought would fix this one is a pretty significant crop. And so this ends here. That's my belly button at best. And so now I wear this with high-waisted skirts, with dresses, under this, which I hadn't actually done before, and I'm kind of digging it. This might be a more regular rotation in my wardrobe. But yeah, so it's pretty significantly cropped, and I think I did 2.5 inches of ribbing at the bottom, and I like that. I would definitely suggest that modification. If you're looking for a good free sweater pattern to kind of play with, this is a nice one. As far as the sleeves, the Flax does have a band of, I think it's garter stitch. I don't like the look of it, And so honestly, it was very easy. And I think a lot of people do this. They just knit it as a straight stockinette sweater. It's a good free builder pattern that you can kind of modify as you go. The other thing I did with the sleeves is I didn't really do any decreases. I'm trying to make sure I'm not lying to you. Yeah, no decreases all the way down. And then right before the cuff, I just decreased pretty rapidly one row and then did some very short ribbing and tubular bind off. I love tubular bind offs. If you're not doing a tubular bind off with 1x1 ribbing, I really think you should. I'm not going to criticize you for it because like it's a little bit fussy, and if you're already someone who doesn't like having to put your yarn on a needle to do anything at the end, like if you're very anti-Kitchener or anything like that too, like it's a finishing technique. It takes some time, but it looks so much more like a machine finished garment. I don't know if you can even see that. Yeah, the fuzz is pretty aggressive, we'll say, but I will do it on every single 1x1 rib that I can. So full support there. It's also nice to have a option for a fully matching cast on and cast off for a project so that like it just looks all so neat and finished. And when I do my like long tail cast on, which is my other go-to for projects, it doesn't match as nicely with like a standard bind off. I'm sure there's better ones for it, but like those are my easy go-tos, and this is my I care about this to look good, and it's not that much harder. It just takes a little more time go-tos. So I'm a fan of tubular. You can do it with 2x2 as well, but your setup rows are a little bit more complex because essentially you're trying to turn it into a 1x1 the row before you actually bind off. So I haven't done that, but who knows, maybe this year. Something to try. What else did I want to say about this? Oh, this yarn, like I said, it is fluffy. I also wouldn't say that it is actually superwash. This is called a superwash yarn. I have knit socks with it that I made for me. I have a women's size like 7.5 foot, and they fit perfectly. And then I machine washed them, didn't even machine dry them, and they did not fit anymore. So there's some nice like house socks for my sister who has a full size, like wears size 6.5 shoes. So they're getting use. But this specific yarn, I would not trust the name Superwash. So yeah, that's that. Moving on. So I only have one finished object this week, or I guess two, since it's a pair. I don't know. It's not a half finished object because the whole thing is done and I've been wearing them. I also haven't blocked them, which I don't know how I really would. Probably the same way I block sweaters, where you just wash and lie flat. All right, enough beating around the bush. I made some mittens. These are an improvised pattern. I've made them kind of before for my husband, and I talked about this very briefly on my first podcast where the sound is very bad and you probably couldn't hear me say anything anyway. But these are knit in my all-time favorite yarn. This is Mondim by Retrosaria by Rosa Pomar. And this colorway is, I did not write it down. Okay, the colorway is A568, and I'm in love with it. I have tried to look to see if I could get more of it on the internet, and I didn't do very well with that. I also looked at my yarn stores where I got it, website, and they don't have it listed, which is sometimes the case. I think if they only have things in stock for very short periods of time, sometimes they don't put them on their website. But they usually have Mondim in stock all the time, just maybe not specific colors of it. So I have fear, and I need to go ascertain what's going on in person at some point. But these are very warm. They are convertible mitts, so I can still swipe on my phone or play Pokemon Go if I want to while I'm out and about. But they do a pretty good job of keeping my fingies warm otherwise. I used the normal like size that I use for socks, and I cast on very close to the size that I would for socks. The wristband, and I knew this would work only because I'd done it before for a pair for my husband, is 2 layers. The inside is a 1x1 rib, so it really hugs your wrist well. But then I like the aesthetic of a full stockinette mitten better. So the outside is pure stockinette. So basically, I knit a certain number of rows, folded, switched to the stockinette, folded the 1x1 rib up inside, and then every other cast on stitch I knit together with every other stockinette stitch that was still on the needles, which I find gives a really good amount of stretch still. It doesn't make it tight. I learned that from a sock pattern, like a bot sock pattern. I'll put the name of it below. I'll probably talk about that pattern someday because I've made 3.5 pairs now. 4 actually, because I've gifted one too, and I will certainly make more. Really good design, but very oddly written. Again, one of those things where it's like, if the design is good enough on a pattern, I will forgive all of its sins. And I think the design on this one, it's kind of like a heel tab sock. So like a lot of expensive running sock brands will have this kind of design where like it comes up a little bit at the back and a little bit at the front, but more at the back. And then it's just a shorty sock. Really good socks. But that every other pickup, where you knit every other one together and it gives it a good amount of stretch still, I love. Also, I'm lazy, so the fewer stitches I have to knit together, like if I don't want to do every single one. So that's the cast on and the ribbing here. And so that's double thick, which kind of matches the double thickness up here. Then after that, it's just a normal like gusset thumb, where every 3rd row you're increasing a stitch on either side. I find is the right ratio for me and for my husband's hands at least, which look pretty average anatomically, so I would suggest the same for you, every 3rd row. And then when I got to a point on my fingers, which was close basically to the tip of my pinky, if you're trying to make some of these, that is where I stopped the cuff here. My husband's pair has fingers. I did not think that was necessary for mine. I am happy that I didn't do it. I don't think it's adding very much to his. They do look cool. They look much more professional. And it was not hard. It's just fiddly. And yeah, again, didn't feel like I needed to do it. So kind of just like a short mitt. And then this is where it gets kind of fun. And if you have knit socks before, you can easily knit yourself a pair of convertible mittens. The thumb I just put on hold at this point because I did those very last. This, I basically picked up the right leg of half of the stitches, and I did offset it just a little bit. You can see the beginning of round is technically like here, and I did like 3 stitches over is where I actually started so that my thumb would be closer to the front of the mitt. And I picked up half the stitches, and then I long-tailed cast on the same amount of stitches, so the same diameter that I was using for the mitt itself. And then I knit like 6 rows of stockinette on this side and 1x1 ribbing on the other side, just so that it would really hug onto my hand. And then I just knit in a stockinette tube until I got to the very end of my pinky when I knew I wanted to start my decreases. And then for the edge of a glove, I like them to be nice and rounded. So what I do and what I've found worked for both my husband's size and for my size is I do 6 rows where I'm decreasing on either side every 3rd stitch, 6 rows where I'm decreasing every other stitch, and then 6 rows of decreasing every stitch, and then Kitchenering the end. And I'm really happy with how these turned out. Like I said, I've used them a lot, so they're already a little bit beat up. they're not pilling at all because Mondim is a lovely yarn. I do have a couple of like little stains. Like I carry a mug of coffee on my walk into work, and it has a lid, but it doesn't like seal fully. And I've definitely gotten coffee on these already. So I need to wash them, but I'm gonna wait till the end of the season at this point. Yeah, very happy. If you want any more information on these, I do have, it's definitely not written up like an actual pattern, but my Ravelry project for these does have kind of like the recipe that I used and the stitches that I used. I did measure my hands, so these are made for me to a T. So if you have a like roughly 6 inches here, roughly 7 inches across the knuckles, and then just shy of 7 inches top to bottom, these would fit you too. And I think I used less than half the ball. I haven't weighed it yet, but it doesn't look substantially smaller than it did when I bought it. So I could probably make at least like a nice headband to go with these. I don't wear a whole lot of like hats or headbands in the winter. My coat has a hood, and I guess I just have a very hot noggin because I don't usually have that issue. And my hair protects my ears unless it's like really, really cold. That's where I run into trouble. So yeah, maybe that'll turn into a little 3-piece set. Stay tuned. Might not happen till next winter, so you'll have to stay tuned a while. All right, that's all my finished objects, but I do have a couple works in progress to talk about, and then some future plans to discuss as well. So I think I'm going to talk about the project that you have definitely seen already next, and there's not really too much to say about it, other than just some meditations on knitting it. So this is, once again, my Birch Pullover by Andrea Mowry, with Drea Renee Knits. And this is knit in the Holstgarn Supersoft in the colorway Jasper. And I am just so in love with this color. It is a half fisherman's rib pullover, which is not something that I particularly am comfortable with. And so last time I definitely talked about putting in like an extra lifeline because the stitch pattern itself is not hard. And in fact, I've really been enjoying it. It's very meditative, and it's teaching me that I really don't mind purling. This is every other row purled, and then every other row is knit one below, purl one. And I don't know if it's just that in comparison to having to rearrange my yarn every time, because I'm a thrower, meaning I hold the yarn in my right hand and I wrap it around the needle every single time. But that's the way I learned, and I haven't really had any issues with hand pain or anything like that, which I will talk about in a little bit. I have knit from here since the last podcast. Look at me, I'm learning, taking notes. So making some steady progress. But what's really depressing is I probably spent the same amount of time on this project that I have on the next project that I'm going to show you. So it's small needles. It's thick knitting because you're basically knitting 2 rows for every unit of a normal row in length that you're getting. But I am finding that this thin yarn and small needles is a really nice break from other projects. I'm not strangling this yarn as much as I normally do. I'm a very tight knitter typically. And so with thicker needles and thicker yarn, I tend to have like I can feel it, especially in my thumbs. I haven't like given myself an injury probably since, I say injury like I had to stop knitting for multiple days. I think 2016, I had to take a little bit of break right at the start of the fall because I was like going way too ham on way too much stuff. But this is really nice and easy to knit and comforting and comfortable. I am getting to the point on the body where I didn't measure it since about halfway through that progress, but I think I want to do like 2 to 3 more inches and then wash it before I do the band, because half fisherman's rib tends to grow a lot. I don't know if that's going to happen with Holst. I find that like for my other projects that I made with Holst, they don't tend to change too much. But again, I don't knit with the stitch pattern a lot, so I really should see how that goes. But I'm loving this. Can't wait to have it. But it's slow going, and I just have to let it be that, because if I'm trying to put too much stress on finishing it too quickly, I'm not going to enjoy it. And it's a very enjoyable process, so just got to give it the time that it needs. Alrighty. Moving on to my next finished object, which I've talked about, but you haven't seen yet. Ooh, not a finished object, a whip. Bum, 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 bum. So, as you can see, like I said, I spent about the same amount of time on this project and that last sweater since the last time we talked, and they're in about the same place. The body's maybe a couple inches shorter on this than it is on the other one, but this is my heavily modified Canic Genser by Pickles. And this is knit in 1 strand of the Blackberry Ridge Woolen Mill Sport Weight in dark bronze, which looks a little bit different. This is the actual color. This is significantly darker. I don't know if that's really coming across. And then 1 strand of the Drops Alpaca, brushed alpaca silk in the curry colorway. And so you can kind of see how those two are coming together. The fabric is lovely. I'm knitting it top down, which is not how the original pattern is written. I'm knitting it in a different gauge than the original pattern is written. In fact, I have a nice little page here that I can share with you of what I am and am not doing from the actual pattern, because it's about 50-50 if I'm going to be honest. So the original is pieced and bottom up, and I'm knitting it top down and in the round. A little bit of that is because I am not sure of how much yarn it's going to take. So far I'm on track. Like this far I am on the, I think, third ball of the brushed alpaca silk at this point, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 left, so I think I'll be fine with that. And then I had 400 grams of the Blackberry Ridge Woolen Mill, and I've been basically putting each into 2 balls because it's really fluffy yarn, and it will start to wrap around like the cogs of my ball winder if I don't basically break the yarn halfway through. And so I have 2 full skeins and 1 half skein that's wound up still to go. So I think I'm on good track to get the size and length of sweater that I want out of this. But I am going to be doing the thing that I talked about in the last episode, where I will finish this ball. I will then break the yarn, put the body on hold and knit the sleeves, and then come back and knit the body the length that I want, just to make sure that I have enough yarn to get a sweater with the right size sleeves. I know I'm going to be able to make the sweater to a length that I want, but I think I'm going to try to make this as tunic-y as I can, because it is a split hem sweater, and I think I want that a little bit longer in the back than in the front, and I think it'd be nice if I could like make it long enough that I can wear it with leggings without showing off like the dreaded camel toe area. So we'll see how that goes. Like I said, top down and in the round. My gauge is significantly different because this is originally knit with a bulky weight yarn, and I'm knitting it with a 17.5 stitch gauge per 4 inches. And then I have done some math to kind of figure out how many stitches I needed to cast on at the beginning. I worked with a couple different diameters that I wanted to make match. So I took the diameter of my neck and figured out about how much extra I wanted to add. I keep saying diameter. It's the circumference. You're going to learn a lot of math on this podcast, I'm realizing. So the circumference is like a fence, circumfence. This is not my strong suit. Algebra's good, geometry bad. But so I took the circumference of my neck. I took a measurement here. I took my bust, and I took here, my lower arm. And that I haven't worried about yet because I haven't even picked up the sleeves yet, but it will come soon enough. And so I knew approximately how many stitches I wanted to have when I got to the bottom here. And I knew how many stitches I wanted at the top. And I knew the like rate of decrease that I wanted. And so I figured out that if I cast on 5 stitches at the bottom of the arm and the bottom of the yoke for either side, that to start, I was going to want 30 stitches on the front, 30 stitches on the back, 5 and 5 as my distribution, because I was going to want to start with 75 stitches for my neck. And then I did the math of if I'm going to do increasing every other row like a traditional raglan, and I'm going to increase by 8 stitches, so 2 stitches at each of the 4 points on a raglan, that I was going to be doing basically 50 rounds or 25 decrease rows to get from this measurement to this measurement of how many stitches I wanted. And looking at my row gauge, that was going to be about 7 and change inch yoke, and that is shorter to about on point with what I like my yoke depth to be. And so I figured I could do that and then add just straight knitting to the bottom if I wanted. And I did end up knitting about an extra inch at the bottom here, and you can see, maybe you can see, right at the bottom here, you can see the decreases stop, and then there's just straight knitting. That can aesthetically be kind of troubling to some people, and I could have kind of made a like modified raglan, which I'll talk about probably when I finish it, as like I'm already identifying little things that I could have done better but aren't really bothering me. But because it's so close to the underarm, I don't think I'm really going to see it, and I don't think it's going to bother me in the least. So not worth ripping back, certainly. And then I have tried it on at this point. Everything fits the way I wanted it to fit. As far as things that I did keep from the original sweater, I did keep the raglan styling. I liked the 1x1 ribbed neck and cuffs and the lengths that were suggested in the pattern. I'm almost feeling like this is going to be too long of a turtleneck for me just because I don't have any other sweaters like this. But the pattern called for a 20 centimeter turtleneck, and so that's what I did. Also calls for keeping the same needles for your ribbing as you do for the body, and I'm definitely liking that. But when I try this on and I fold it just one, it's very cozy. This is like if I was making a slip over that I knew I was going to be outside in the cold in, this would be how I'd want it, because it's dense. It's going to block out any wind from getting to my neck or my underneath of my chin, and I can even like kind of just tuck myself into it a little bit more. It's going to be very warm, but I think indoors I'm probably going to wear it folded triple. And I really like this aesthetic, so looking forward to this. The other thing I am keeping is the split hem detail, which I'm very excited about, and I've already talked about, but that was the thing that kind of drew me to this pattern in the first place, is that split hem and kind of chunky combo. So I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to this. Based on how fast it's gone, hopefully I will have it done by the next podcast. It is not as cold here as it was when I cast this on. And so for a little bit, I was kind of like almost rushing, like not really, like I was still enjoying the process, but I definitely was pushing myself to knit it faster and more exclusively than I would have otherwise. Because that's what I did with those mitts. I was like, I need mittens now. I started them and I didn't work on anything else until they were both done. And it took like 2 snow days. It was a lot of rapid fire knitting. And I kind of, like I talked about, I can't really do that with this sweater. This is knit on much thicker yarn. It is knit on size 7 needles, or US 7. I think it's a 4.5. Yep, 4.5 millimeter. And that is about the threshold where my hands start telling me, like, this is too much. I can't do this like fast for too long. So I think I need to let it go a little bit. This is not going to be for this season. Like, I'll probably maybe get a couple wears out of it if we get some really cold days in March or so. But I don't think it's going to be like I'm wearing it every day until the really cold, like the depth of cold next year, or if I have any like outdoor events, like if I go to a soccer game or something like that, where I know I'm going to be out and it's going to be below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, then, you know, maybe that would be a thing, or maybe I wouldn't have to wear a coat if I had that. I'm just justifying my my need to knit a thick sweater at this point in time. I know a lot of people are already switching to summer knits. And on that topic, I did buy some yarn. I thought it would be here maybe today. It is stuck in customs, so I've just been dreaming, just planning and dreaming for the future of what I want to knit. So let's talk about that now. If you don't like to talk about future knitting, thanks for looking at all the visual parts of this visual podcast. I am going to include pictures of the things that I might want to make with this yarn, but we'll go from there. So I have bought a couple different things of yarn. I've got a lace weight sweater that has been in my want to make list forever, that I'm very excited about. That is going to, like, the yarn that I bought for that with this shipment is going to be that sweater. No question about it. I bought some fingering weight that has some cotton content that I'm really excited about for summer yarn, and I've got a couple patterns that I'm kind of looking at, but I'm not super invested in what that's going to be yet. Just dreaming. And then the yarn that I want to talk about is a worsted weight. I bought just over 1,400 yards of it, and I bought it because I've had this pattern in my mind for years. Actually, I don't know when it came out. Basically, from the time I saw it, though, I was like, I want to make that. It's been in my favorites in Ravelry. It's the Hartford by Julie Hoover, which is a Brooklyn tweed pattern. It's originally written in their yarn. And it is a beautiful cardigan with, I think they described the textured stitch as looking woven. And it really does. It looks so nice. I don't think I've seen that stitch pattern on another sweater before, which I'm drawn to. And I do love a good textured stitch pattern. That is my happy place knitting wise, especially if it's easily memorizable and I'm doing it over like a large swath. That's my jam. The thing that is, I bought the yarn, and the next morning I woke up and was like, but what if I don't want to make that sweater? Is the ribbing is picked up. And the ribbing is seemingly a full stretch from like back neck all the way down, all the way around, and it's like a longer cardigan too. And I don't mind it being like pieced and seamed. That I'm okay with. I broke a needle last time I picked up a lot of stitches like that to knit a button band, and it's not double knit. It's just ribbed, so it's not like it would be terrible. And I may still make it eventually, but I'm a little bit less enamored with it than I was now that I've kind of like been thinking about the actual process of making it and not just the product having it, which I should really be more conscious of when I'm picking out patterns in the first place, but who cares? It's knitting. You can stop. You can turn something into something else. This yarn for this sweater was gonna be a fisherman's rib cardigan that I was improvising and then I frogged it halfway through. This is made out of ramen noodle yarn. Like, that's why, personally, as an anxious human being, I like knitting so much better than sewing, because unless I'm steeking, I'm really not ever tied to the thing that I have finished making, you know? It can always be something else. That said, in lieu of having to frog and turn this Hartford into something else after I've made it, I've got a couple other patterns that I've been looking at that I think I have the yarn for in the stash that I've now purchased for that Hartford, and I would very much like to make and wear all of these sweaters. There are 3 options that I've come up with, and I'll put pictures up of all of them. I would love feedback on this. Like, have you made any of these and liked them? Are there things about these sweaters that you see as red flags that you would not make? Are there things about these that you like? I'm not gonna, obviously, I don't have the yarn to show you, but if it makes any difference, it is supposed to be kind of like a sea blue, seafoam green, somewhere in there, and on different websites it looks significantly different, but it should be kind of like a lighter blue green, hopefully. We'll see. I'll keep you posted. But I think the top contender right now is the Barnyard Guernsey redesigned by Nora Gahn, and I do really love Nora Gahn patterns. They're always so beautiful. Like I said, I'm a textured stitch girl. And ooh, she's so good. She makes such good textured stitch patterns, a little bit of light cabling, but like it's really right in the thing that I like to look at and I like to make. They're just a lot of times kind of a bear. And this one, in the description in Ravelry, it's like, you're knitting this pattern on both sides. It's very detailed. Be aware before you get into it. I'm like, okay, thank you for the warning, Nora. But it is a free pattern. I think the original, because this is, again, called the Barnyard Guernsey redesigned. I think the original was a paid pattern. And the original was also knit in pieces and seamed. This one is knit in the round. It is a drop shoulder construction, and it is kind of textured at the top. It apparently has slightly narrower, more modern sleeves than the original, which I'm fine with. Less yarn, more sweater, easy peasy. And I'm thinking that I might end up steeking this one, just the sleeve holes, if I do make it, because as much as I don't really have to deal with like rowing out, where when you're knitting a garment flat, your knit stitches are tighter than your purl stitches, and so you get kind of a like heat wave sort of thing effect. I don't usually get that, even in less stretchy yarns. But my purl stitches and knit stitches, like when I'm going back and forth between the two, sometimes that looks a little bit different when I'm knitting it flat versus knitting it straight, and I think might be something to do with the twist of yarns that I'm using or something like that. But I'm hesitant because this Guernsey is knit in the round up to here, and then you knit flat back and forth, and I'm worried that that diamond moss stitch is going to look different between here and here. The thing that kind of throws me off again, though, is then there's neck shaping where you cast off and then you continue to work flat on either side by itself, and I don't think I could steek that successfully. Even if I was continuing to knit in the round and then cut open the armholes, I would still have to knit flat for a little bit of it. So who knows? I could also try to modify it myself back towards the non-redesign and basically do it pieced and seamed so I'm working flat the whole time, which again, I don't mind. It might change my amount of yarn needed just a little bit, but I think I'm going to have enough to do that anyway with the size that I would pick in this pattern. So we'll see, but I really do like it. I would like to make this at one point, and who would have thought there's a free pattern by Nora Gahn on Ravelry? Like, just pennies from heaven, baby. Loving it. The next pattern that I might make with this yarn is the Cascades by Michelle Wang. which is also a Brooklyn tweed pattern. I think I like Brooklyn tweed patterns. And this, I think, is my top contender right now. Did I say that about the Barnyard Guernsey too? They're tied. This is a bottom-up raglan. It has cables and double moss stitch as like the non-cabled panels of it. And oh, it's pretty. It's so gorgeous. And it looks like it would take more yarn than they're recommending. So that's always good, because a lot of like fluff, I say fluff, when your stitch pattern goes like makes a thicker actual fabric, stockinette is very flat. But when you have pearls or cables or anything that is making your actual fabric wall thicker, that is giving you more of a barrier layer, because it traps air in there, and air stays about the same temperature it was. So if you have warm air from your body in that sweater and then you go outside, it is harder for that air to leave if it's got more fabric to be trapped in. Biology. A thicker fabric with the same amount of yarn is a win. And a lot of times, like with cable patterns or with really like all over ribbed sweaters or something like that, you're using a lot more yarn for that. And I don't feel like this was the case with this one's requirements. So that's attractive to me as someone who's frugal. Someone told me to say, not cheap, frugal, is to not have to worry about buying extra yarn to make a sweater with extra texture. So that's nice. Also, the pictures, I mean, I'm going to put some up here, but they're just stunning. It does bother me, total tangent, it bothers me that in the official pictures for this sweater, though, they don't include what the neckline looks like, because the model is always wearing this big scarf around the top. Like, it's a great way to style it, and I like that they include that as some of the pictures, but I really would have liked, other than a flat lay, like an idea of what that neckline looks like on the person. Very, very small requirement details. I have a podcast. I'm going to be picky about things now. And apparently that's one of the things I'm picky about. Anyway. The final option that I have come up with, and this one's not tied, this one's third, very clearly, is the Pignon Pullover by Laura Leme, or Leem. Did I say Laura? Jesus, Elizabeth. Paula Leme, or Paula Leem. Still don't know how to say the last name, but I'm so sorry, Paula. Your sweater pattern is beautiful. It is a bottom-up round yoke, and the body is like a seersucker, is what she calls it. And then it's a 1x1 rib with increases, or with decreases, I guess, since it's bottom up, for the round yoke. And I think that's beautiful. I also think it'll get around one of the issues that I have with round yokes, that I've like knit or tried to knit and frogged in the past, and that I don't think they fit me terribly well. And so I think, kind of like when you make a ribbed hat to give as a gift, like you get some forgiveness in like the shape of their head and the size of their head, because ribbing will kind of just hold whatever you got, whatever you put in there. It's a little more fluid and grabby, I guess. That's not the right word. You understand what I'm saying, though. A ribbing will hold on to a variety of shapes and sizes that a stockinette tube would not. I think that this 1x1 yoke is probably going to fix like a multitude of fit issues that people might have with a normal round yoke. Like, you don't have to worry about making sure that the increases fit the exact curvature of your body. So I'm really attracted to that. And also, it's kind of cute. Like, it doesn't look like anything else that I have sweater-wise, so I think it'd be a good choice to add to my wardrobe. I'm debating whether to talk about this. There's a lot of like little sweater modifications with mostly algebra that I've talked about in this episode. And I think a lot of people who want to modify their own sweaters are a little bit scared on where to start, or if you want to make a sweater but you want it to fit the way that one of your sweaters is, and you're not sure how to do that, and you're not sure how to kind of work with the types of increases and decreases that you would need to do and at what ratio. I know that it's become more popular for people to knit full-on patterns, or to write full-on patterns that kind of walk you through that. But there's a resource that I found when I started knitting, and I'm going to see if I can pull it up, because it honestly really helped when I got into garments and knowing, like, if I want to modify it to look like this, how can I do that? Okay, yes, it still exists. I'm very excited. I believe there were videos to accompany this, and I don't know if that is still the case. But there's a Knitpicks resource called Nina's Sweater Class, and I've at least been able to open the first two documents, which are entitled Lesson 1, Swatching and Measuring, and Lesson 2, Casting on and Working the Hem. So it sounds like it kind of goes step by step, and it walks you through some of those algebraic calculations of how to, like, increase the way you want, of how to pick the type of ribbing you want. And it's got little things like tighter cuffs and waistband make a warmer sweater with fewer gaps to let the chill air in. If this sounds like what you want, blah, blah, blah. Like, it really walks you through a lot of the considerations that you want when you're either starting designing your own stuff or making modifications to an existent pattern. So I really recommend it. Yeah, it's a decent read, and helped me a little bit when I was kind of moving into garment knitting more confidently. I've said this in previous episodes, but I didn't really have any experienced knitters that I knew growing up. Like, I learned from my grandmother's friend over a long weekend, because I found some of her friend's knitting needles in, like, a drawer, and I was like, I want to learn how to knit, and I assumed that my grandma would know. Did not know. No one in my family knits. None of my, like, friends knit as much as I've tried to get them into the hobby. So the internet is kind of my mom in this scenario. And the great thing is the internet has a lot of resources, and this specifically is one that helped me a lot. That, and watching a lot of podcasters and trying a variety of patterns. I've improvised, like, sweater cap sleeves that I got from a free pattern from Purl Soho, and, like, it made so much more sense to, like, just do short rows to knit a cap, and then it fits so good, and you're like, well, I need to do that on everything that I own now. And later on, like, I've heard Mel Make Stuff talk about how, I think that's, like, I'll put the name below. I don't read a lot of knitting books. Again, the internet is my mom. But, like, then hearing other podcasters talk about it and going, oh, okay, so it would be in most of the patterns that person writes, or you can use it on other things because you've seen other podcasters or people that you know modify sweaters to include that technique that you like. And it's just really exciting. Like, if I were more into fashion, I would probably be even more unbearable to talk to about these things. But it's just so fun to have the power of knowing what you like and how it fits, and modifying a new garment to fit the way that you know you exactly like. This is such a cool hobby. And if you can do it without making a bunch of mistakes along the way first, that's even better. Not that there's anything wrong. That's how, in a lot of ways, I also learned how to knit. So I'm making a lot of mistakes. That's all I've got to talk about this week. If you have any ideas, again, on which of those sweaters I should make, I think I was pretty straightforward about how I feel currently, but I'm easily swayable. And then, what are you knitting on? If you have a knitting podcast, let me know. I have a new podcast that I'm subscribing to from the last episode, so very excited about that. And then otherwise, I hope you're knitting on something that brings you joy. I hope you're staying warm or cool, depending on where you are in the world. Hope you're staying comfortably temperatured. We'll say that. But thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you again in a couple weeks. Bye.